Awesome. Well, amazing to be with you guys here today.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
for coming.
thank you. As was mentioned, I'm Mario. I'm the founder of the Generalist. I had the good fortune of writing about Dune and getting to know Fredrik and Mats through that process. And yeah, you two obviously need no introduction in this context. I'd love to start out just by sort of revisiting history a little bit, which, if I remember correctly, Dune really started 4 years ago in Berlin, right?
Basically, yes. I think the company was, like on paper, founded like 3rd of September. And I think ETH Berlin 2018 was something around the 10th of September. So basically exactly 4 years ago, yes.
Got it. So I'm curious, 4 years later, one, how does it feel to go from founders who have just put their company on paper to this? And also, like, why this place? How did you guys choose this as the venue for Dunecon?
Well, I can answer the first part of that question. It feels pretty surreal to be here, surrounded by the community that we help steward. Being back in Berlin is, it's a really special place. I forgot to mention in the sort of opening ceremony, but I'm a big fan of Club Mate, and just being surrounded by it every day is fantastic.
Yeah, as for this venue, I think we in general care a lot about sort of what we do and want it to feel right in addition to sort of function right. So it was important for us to have a place that we kind of feel like we could identify with. And there's a lot of cool things that's been going on in this building. For one, well, maybe not so cool per se, but it was the broadcasting headquarters of the East Germany and the Soviets, and sort of a propaganda machine, which of course is in a way an interesting contrast to how we think about open information and letting anyone access whatever data and be critical as opposed to sort of getting top down told what's going on. And then it's also like an important cultural venue. So just like next week, there's an amazing pianist called Nils Fram that's playing here. One of my favorite electronic artists, Fortet, had a DJ set here, or like a set here that's recorded, and you can find it on Spotify. So I feel like it has a lot of all those aspects that we love to have baked into what we do, and make it personal and make it something beautiful in addition to just getting people in a room, but also do it in the right way.
Yeah, for someone who loves and appreciates music as much as you do, I feel like it must be cool to be like, yeah, I'm taking the same space up as Fortet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think he was standing right here.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always thought was like particularly interesting about Dune when I got to hear the story from you guys was just how much grinding you guys had to do in the early days. And I think probably a lot of folks have already heard the fundraising story, how many no's you had to go through to get to a yes, and the sort of gritty things you had to do to get Dune off the ground. And so I'm curious, like as you reflect back, what were some of the things that you did that didn't scale but were super important?
Where to start? A few of the speakers have alluded to our, I guess, obsession with Telegram and just being really close to the early users. If you ask the current Dune team today, they'll all say that I don't have any notifications on any applications, with the exception of one application and one user, which I had on Telegram, Teo, who's now the leader of Uniswap Labs. It's an early user that would message me Friday night, 11 p.m. on the dot with a query that would not execute on Dune. And I would, without a single sort of gap in Fridays, have to go in and fix that. And and I rewrote his query, and then he could publish his research. And I guess Fredrik, you did the same for Elias and others.
Yeah, there was a lot of Telegram, essentially, and just being obsessive about letting people get their queries right. It's essentially just customer support, right? So it's not too glamorous in a way, but I think it wasn't like a deliberate strategy or anything like that. It was just like, oh, these people, we were grateful for them trying out our tool. Many of them didn't even know SQL, so they were like trying to learn, and we were just excited to have people work on it, and got excited to sort of jump in and try to figure out how to get these queries working. I think there's you kind of have to have some passion for making people succeed with your product, and when it's hard, you can go in and sort of manually patch it along the way, and it took us further than we would have imagined, I think.
Yeah, I remember Theo told me that you were giving him like weekly SQL lessons.
Yes.
To get him up and running.
Initially, he was like, I don't know SQL, can I get this stuff in Excel? And we were like, no, but we can learn you SQL. We'll sort of brute force SQL upon you. And we literally had a recurring call once a week where he would,
very hands-on customer acquisition. Like, you will learn this.
Yes.
As you mentioned, there was a lot of no's, right? And part of the reasoning behind the no's is that having a product that requires users to write SQL sounds insane. And I think we really wanted to prove that SQL is the language of data, and it's actually the best interface that you can have. But that did mean teaching some people how to write it. And I like to think of ourselves as having a big part in bringing SQL back to life, as sort of making a new generation of SQL programmers, the wizards.
The fact that we're here today at all, I think, also speaks to one of Dune's other strengths, which is community. And I think it's a topic that lots of people talk about, but it's not necessarily easy to articulate what makes a great community. How do you nurture it? How do you guys think about nurturing Dune's community today, and how has that evolved over the course of the company?
Yeah, your DMs definitely don't scale to thousands of users. That's for sure. I think what we've succeeded in is to bring the spirit that we had in the beginning to a wider audience, and to people sort of coming along and learning and then paying it forward. And I think that, I think as Mats touched upon in his talk earlier this morning, that you don't really have a community if people are not interacting with each other. If you just have a bunch of people that care, that's great. But a community means that these folks need to have a relationship with each other. And I think that is something we've sort of managed to foster. And I think it's also important that they're working on Dune is proof of work, as Elias said in his talk just recently. And so it's not like you can't just sort of show up, because then sort of you're not sort of that useful, right? So everybody has to put in some work, and it's quite easy to sort of filter out when you look into the Discord, is this person trying or not really? Are they just can someone solve this problem for me? Or are they okay, let me try if you give me a little bit of input, right? So I think that is quite powerful, and maybe something that, since a lot of these communities in crypto are more liquid, it's easier to, be in and out of it, you don't get that same sort of stickiness, because the people that do bother to learn sort of, have leveled up and have this sort of powerful skill set, and then stick around.
We also talk a lot about, I think in this space, how crypto can create new opportunities for people, and it strikes me that Dune might be one of the most concrete examples of that, where you're, as we heard from some of the wizards earlier, giving people the chance to have different types of employment. I'm curious, how do you see that pipeline evolving?
Yeah, I guess incredibly rewarding to hear the Wizard panel here. People who have used Dune and landed like incredible jobs in the space. A few other folks came up to me today and said, I have a job because of Dune, which is insane. First of all, because you have a job because of yourself and the proof of work that you did, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, it kind of gets to something very interesting, I think, about like the fact that all of this is so public in this proof of work, right? Like, it seems very unlikely someone would go up to, Bill Gates and be like, I have a job because of Excel. Thank you so much.
Well, that's probably true, though.
I know.
For a lot of folks.
Kind of is. Thank you for Word.
But I think it's one thing that's exciting about how wizards get jobs in the space is that obviously there's a limited amount of developers in the world, and everybody wants to hire developers, and they have this thing called GitHub where you have a profile and you can show your work, and that's essentially all you need to get a good job if you're good. And I think what's exciting is that Dune is complicated enough that like you need to have some proficiency and show some work to be good at it. But it is accessible to way more people than could ever sort of get into the command line and start sort of building something from that. So it opens up opportunities for a lot of people that are willing to just roll up their sleeves. And obviously there's a lot of very smart sort of business people that don't necessarily exactly know the skills, but can learn pretty quickly and become very powerful. Like if you can do some SQL, like you can figure out arbitrary things about what's happening in data, and that the fact that people can then, in a similar way that sort of GitHub has helped developers, you can just go on Dune, you can write some stuff, you can learn, and that's your CV, and that could sort of meaningfully expand the opportunities you have. That I think is super duper exciting.
Yeah, speaking of opening up access to this data, today was obviously a big day in that you guys launched the API. I know that when we talked, that was a big focus and something that was on the horizon. I would love to just hear you guys tell us a little bit of what it took to get here, and how do you now start to think about scaling usage and managing that over the next few months?
For sure. So I guess initially when we started building Dune, or when we first got some traction, we were reluctant to add an API to Dune because we felt that work that was done in the open on the Dune platform gave back more to the community. When people built dashboards on Dune, that had value for all the other users on Dune. And in our heads, if you took that data outside of Dune and built something else with it, we wasn't entirely sure if that was additive or subtractive to the community. I think we've since come around, and I think we saw some amazing examples today, like the tools that CowSwap has already built that is contributing back to what you can do with Dune. And the API really opens up what you can do with Dune. I mean, we're a small team. We're soon to be 50 people. And I think a small team needs to have focus. And building an API lets us do what we're good at, and it lets community members do what they're good at, which is using this data for fantastic things that we probably couldn't even imagine. Yeah.
And I can add, it's in terms of the process, it's definitely been incredibly painful to you get a request every single day, like literally. You can go in our Discord, go on Twitter, and it's just like, Dune API, when Dune API, this would be useful, like can I have API access, day in and day out. And it's definitely been very much a great pain to sort of deep down we want to build something useful, and we try to I think one of the sort of things we've done right is to not overcomplicate things relative to the traditional startup world, and just be relentless about building something useful. So it's been really painful not to have this API out earlier. But we also care a lot about making good long-term decisions, and we've wanted to build it in a way that makes it more scalable and doesn't just like sort of break out the gate. And there's a lot of things happening underneath the surface that makes sort of means this needs to handle a lot of traffic in sort of at our scale. As Mats said this morning, like we're doing 10 million SQL queries executions a month, which is like a significant scale already. So that's part of why it's been sort of not coming out before, and that has been painful. But we always try to make decisions that sort of makes the most sense for the longer term.
One of Dune's other sort of key characteristics in my mind is like a really strong sense of taste, and I think you definitely feel it at this event, right? Like everything has been really thought through. The lanyards are this wood engraving, the swag. You got the socks, the Dune lookbook. I'm curious, like what you guys think that taste is, if you had to describe it, and where do you find sort of inspiration, particularly from the business world, in terms of like that aesthetic and sense of quality?
So I think one thing that I've always found sort of weird is how there are all these sort of barriers between different sort of sectors and segments that sort of humans have created. Like, there's something called art, there's something called business, and there's something called, education, whatever. And all of those have like their different sort of ways of working and whatnot. And a lot of people, go to their workplace and sort of indulge in that culture, and then like they go home and they're like, oh, like I actually love art, and all of these. And you go and look at memes on the internet and whatnot, right? I've always found sort of that line like weird. Like, why not just like do whatever is fun, whenever, all the time? Like, why not just like have as much fun as possible? Why make it sort of boring and uptight and all these things when there's so many fun things to explore in the world and across all domains. And so I think we've just embraced that, let's like have fun. And also I think this part about sort of integrity and passion really matters, because like if you want to make the most of life, like you should sort of feel genuine interest in everything you do. And like I care about, like we're a $1 billion company and I still like, I'm hands on our swag. Like nothing gets done without me looking at it, because I'm like, it needs to feel correct. And that's simply because like I hate it if like I get handed a t-shirt that's just like shitty and ugly. And I think we just aspire to do inspiring things with the product, with the community, with these events, or with whatever we do, and just put passion into it.
I talked to a founder earlier this week that I think shares a lot of your DNA, and the way that they described their work was as pragmatic art, which I thought was a really good articulation of that style of building. And they sort of made the comparison of also to, a bridge. You could make a bridge that is pure concrete and, nothing to look at, but people put the time to make this beautiful structure. And I think Dune has that sort of like pragmatic art feel to it. It does something extremely useful, but has taste. You guys have worked together for so long now. In some respects, I'm sure you know each other better than almost anyone else does. What are the sort of unique traits that Fredrik, you would say Mats has, and Mats, you would say Fredrik has?
I'll start. I've thought a lot about Fredrik after working with him for 4.5 years. Today, the word that comes to mind after my talk is shamelessness. And it brings me back to the first Berlin, where we were like first East Berlin, when we were walking around East Berlin with a notebook where Fredrik had hand-drawn charts. And we were pitching people do you want...
I was pitching, you were...
You were pitching, I was standing like this in the background.
You were pitching people hand-drawn charts?
Yeah, like, do you want this for your protocol? Like, look, this is like your users over time. And I was so embarrassed. And that sort of relentless,
I gotta say, I start to understand why you got some no's.
yeah, so I guess I had to build, because I was so embarrassed by like all the things that he was selling. And
yeah, we had like we were 1 week in, had maybe a couple of lines of code, if anything, and I pitched the hand-drawn charts. I had to fight both to get the customers and to let this guy let me actually do it. So I had to fight on all fronts to go pitch the thing. But yeah.
Good on you. You stuck with it. That is definitely a thing that doesn't scale. You hand drawing if you're doing tried.
Yeah, definitely not.
What would you say is something that is particularly unique about Mats?
I think Mats is really good at focusing, which is something that's incredibly hard when you build any company, I think, but maybe in particular for Dune, because Dune has quite a big surface area, and we have all this infrastructure, all this data flowing in, different blockchains and all that, and then you have this sort of analytics layer and interface and whatnot to explore this data. And then you have the whole social component, and people have profiles, and you have content discovery, and so it's a lot of things going on at the same time. And that also inevitably leads us to wanting to do a lot of great things on all fronts. And I think this is something that it just takes a lot of time to learn. I think we keep thinking that we need to be more focused, but Mats is really good at that, and really trying to having that discipline to take things off the table. Could probably still, as a company, get better at it. I think, but I think that is really valuable, and always asking can we take something out? Can we sort of do one thing first?
Amazing. Well, we're into sort of the last 10 minutes here or so. I wonder if we should open it up to the audience for questions.
Is there something you would do differently if you could go back a couple of years?
Release the API a little bit earlier, maybe? I guess the downside of focus is that you have to choose what not to do. And on that list was the Dune API for a long time. And a lot of other things that you all want from Dune, right? And thank you, by the way, for listening to my request this morning, to speaking out to the Dune team. We now have a long list of requests and feedback that we can work with. That's been amazing. Probably going to have to say no to a bunch of them, realistically, but yeah. What would you do different?
I think we probably should have started hiring a little bit earlier. I think we spent a little over 2 years before we hired the first team member. And it took us a while to sort of get off the ground with the hiring. I think it was very useful for us to be very lean in the beginning, so we could survive and be cheap and change direction if needed and these things. Mm-hmm. But I think we maybe could have seen earlier that we were actually onto something, and maybe should have started to hire a little bit. I think it's only about 1.5 years ago since I stopped replying to the support requests that we get to support@dune.com, which probably was a little bit late.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any moment at the beginning or at some point during your journey where you guys thought to yourself, holy shit, people are actually going to use this. This is actually going to work out?
We had a good session at DAppCon in 2019, so basically 3 years ago. So 1 year into founding Dune, we held a workshop at Dunecon here in Berlin, and I think we had like really no idea if like anyone would show up or care or anything like that. And it was like a classroom at the university. I think there was like 25 people in the room. We're very excited because Amin from Spank Chains and various other legendary projects showed up. So that was, I think, a great sort of moment to actually see that people were building on it, and both like technical and non-technical users. And it does really, as I said this morning, hit a bit differently when it's in person. It can be hard to see some numbers on a screen and see some users online, but when you actually go and see like, oh, there's like this group of people that using our thing, that's, yeah, pretty nice to see. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Who are the competitors that you worry the most about? Is it crypto-specific data analytics providers, or is it Google waking up tomorrow deciding to do something you guys are doing? What do you think about the prospect of that?
So we honestly don't spend a lot of time thinking about competitors. It's actually something we find quite important to not obsess over. Ever since we started, there's been a ton of crypto data companies. The data is open, so it's like relatively obvious to do something. So it really is not something that we worry that much about or think about. We just want to solve problems. So I don't know if there's anything to mention in particular, but of course it's open data, very competitive. There are different angles. The space is still early, so I think it's we have to stay hungry and keep pushing forward and build the API. Like, admittedly, we were like a little late to get the API out, for instance, and so I think we're not sort of worried that much about it, but definitely there's a lot of different players, and we need to be the best in the world to keep surviving.
Thank you.
Hi. So just a bit about like your pathway to here. So has there ever been any moment where there was like this strong impulse to pivot because it was so hard, and how do you resist the desire to pivot because times are hard, and how do you deal with that?
I didn't quite catch that.
The question was if we were...
Well, there was like any instance where the original plan didn't exactly go as planned, and basically you felt like the need to pivot to be able to stay in the game.
I see.
And you managed to somehow stick to the original plan to be able to get where you are right now.
I guess pivot we have done a couple of times, at least once that comes to mind. So Dune started out as a pure B2B play. Like when we got started out, we brought crypto data into a Postgres database, and people paid for a connection string to that database. We had about a handful of customers, and we thought that was really good. We had revenue, and we were out pitching investors, some in this room probably, to no luck. And at the same time, we saw like this data being incredibly useful. There were sort of dashboard sites around, like, can't remember exactly which ones, like Loan Scan, and there was like different dashboards on the interweb that was using crypto data. And I remember we came to the conclusion that, let's just flood the world with dashboards. Let's be the ones, like, if all of this is open and free, why shouldn't we be the ones that bring it to the world? And that was sort of the first pivot, mini pivot at least, and that was over Christmas. I remember having some hard conversations with Fredrik, and yeah, in 2019, we started building what you now know as Dune. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So my question revolves around the business model and the sustainability of the operation of Dune. So basically, I want to ask how the team sees the balance between Dune as a public good, or the data being a public good, and the position of Dune as an open source product or tool for user like me or for public to access. Because we can see that there's a battle for product like Nansen for being a little bit less accessible to the public because it goes subscription models. So I want to see how the Dune team sees this. And I see that the team has released a new tiered querying model today. So I just want to know more thoughts from the team to see how to generate revenue in the future and how sustainable it is.
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, we've for a very long time had a paid product. So I think it's about 2.5 years ago since we launched like the paid tier that we still have today that we're luckily soon changing. So I think this model makes a lot of sense where we have a very, very powerful free product that anyone can use. That will always remain the case. And then eventually people demand more. Like we talked about earlier today, like there's so many that want performance. And so what we're doing is letting people pay for performance if they want that. And if they want to have things private or export the data, there will be a free tier of the API as well. But if you want to export a lot of data, it will be a paid tier. So I think we've found a model where anyone can use it for free, contribute, and have things out there. But if you want these extra features or want to do some proprietary work elsewhere or inside of Dune, then you pay for that. So we think this model it makes a lot of sense and is both sort of economically viable, but also compatible with sort of having this data open. And I think this is something that excites me a lot about Dune, is that this sort of business model incentivizes us to have all of this data. We don't think about us as selling access to data. We think about us as a tool. And if you want a more powerful tool, you can pay for that. But that doesn't mean that others can't get access. So we're not predicated on limiting anything. And it really is our incentive to let as many dashboards, as many data sets exist and have that flourish and be available to everyone. So, yeah. A good question, thanks.
Hi. So as Mario told that you guys are like very stylish because of, and I think like the style is basically about the balance. And I think like one of the greatest thing you done with Dune was basically, how you build the community of wizards. And I think you wouldn't be able to build a community of wizards without actually, using SQL as your like kind of like the language you use for querying the whole database. Because it kind of like puts some additional learning curve, and then you have like an engaging community, people who really want to go into the Dune. So I would love to hear the story about why did you choose SQL and, for example, not some fancy visual query builder? Yeah, it's because SQL is the MVP. I mean, if you have a database, any database, or most databases, the interface is SQL, and it was like, couldn't really, it was just a two-man shop, so coming up with any other way of like building queries and dashboards would be incredibly difficult. So it was just a default choice, really, that stuck with us for all this time. And it was a great choice. SQL is the language of data. And I think the really interesting part, you touched upon it, is that SQL is maybe what made the proof of work in Dune, right? That little thing you had to learn in order to contribute, in order to be part of the community. And so in some weird way, having that little like obstacle that you had to overcome maybe means that you're a little bit more connected to Dune.
and the product, as opposed to like a drag and drop interface or something like that.
Hey there, thanks again for getting me a job. But other than that, you mentioned this morning these new paid tiers. Are you willing to shed some light on those, or is it coming for later on what those include and what the differences are?
Yeah, so they're coming in November. We're working on them. And the sort of main benefit is performance, so that you can buy more performance, but it will also include private content within teams, so you can share and have things private within your team. There's going to be, sort of over time, query scheduling. It's also going to play with the API, so you can schedule queries and like get results through API. So yeah, and then we're planning to add more features over time. But I think the sort of headliner item out the gate is the performance. And as you saw, also excited to have a wider spectrum of price points, and sort of you can have $69 and you can get something pretty powerful from that, or you can sort of go all the way up to 1337 or into the call us plan and get some ultra powerful stuff. So yeah, it's the performance thing I think is the most exciting, but also other things you would expect from a more fleshed out sort of paid experience.
Do you want the buses?
Yes. So I think that's it for this venue. This was the last session of today. We have now an after party at a place called Dark Matter. It is very Berlin, I think. We have several amazing wizards that are, of course, polymaths that know different things, including amazing music. So there's going to be wizard DJs. There's going to be buses just outside or around the building. So you can grab a beer in the fridge on your way out, and you can hop on the bus. It's a little bit closer to the city center. And it's an amazing venue. There's going to be food there. So no need to worry about that. Yeah, so the party's going to continue, and then we can really, really celebrate the merge. I want to thank you all for coming today. It's been beautiful to see you all. We really, really appreciate you bothering to travel and spend time here. We really can't thank you enough. And looking forward to seeing you at Dark Matter. Thank you. Thank you.